Hey everybody, and welcome to the new year. If you're watching this after the live segment, this was recorded New Year's Day 2018, first day of the new year. So thanks to everybody for logging on, and if you're watching this after the fact, thank you very much for checking it out. These are certainly popular, and I like doing them. It's a lot of fun. So if you have any questions, get them in the chat box. I just wanted to, first of all, give away the Amazon Echo Dot and also the Nissan Leaf notebook here that I got when I was on the Nissan Leaf program several weeks ago. There's the Leaf there. And I have done a random draw. I just put all of the emails into one folder and then I just stop on one, and that winner is, his name is David Sipnewski. David Sipnewski is looks like lives in the Vancouver area because he's got a 604 area code. So congratulations, David. I've sent you an email. Look for that email and make sure to get back to me with your details so I can send that off. And if we get any more stuff throughout the year, you'll definitely be getting that as well. All right, let's get into the chat box and see what people are saying. So Mario Della Riva says, Happy New Year to you, Andrea and the boys. My wife, Andrea, does videos with me, and she's going to be doing more, which is great. His question is, your thoughts on hydraulic versus electronic power steering? Well, this was a real problem when the car manufacturers switched over from hydraulic power steering to electric power steering. The early examples were really bad. Like they were so dead feeling when you drove the car, and now they're getting much better. There are still some manufacturers out there that don't invest in good systems, and you can certainly notice that. The higher grade car you get, the much better system. For example, Porsche uses what's called an electromechanical system, and it's a much higher grade. So there are different levels of steering racks that car companies can invest in. And what would typically happen with the early systems, and they had what was called a dead on-center feel. And a lot of people ask this question when we review cars. A lot of reviewers say the steering feels dead on center. And what that means is when you're driving down the road and you're going straight, there's no sort of feedback to the driver as to what the wheels are doing. And you're always doing these little micro corrections. You're driving kind of like this back and forth, and it really is horrible. And the good systems are the ones where you get that feedback through. So why do car companies do electric power steering? Because it's efficient. It doesn't have a parasitic loss in the engine. It takes energy to turn the belts, and the old hydraulic systems, you remove those belts, you move the hydraulic pump, and the engine uses less fuel. That's why they're doing it. So you really need to drive a car and test it to see if it works for you. All right, this one comes from Charsenal. He says, dedicated summer car, for an example, a Porsche 911 with a winter beater, or a capable year-round fun car, for example, the Golf R. I have the Golf R. It's going back tomorrow. I've had it for 2 weeks over the holidays. Look for that video in the next couple of days. And you know what's interesting is I've driven the Golf R many times. Had a chance to drive it on the track a year or so ago at Calabogie, just outside of Ottawa. And the more I drive the Golf R, the more I'm liking the GTI. It's funny. And they've changed the pricing, and that's kind of what the topic of that video is when you see it come out in the next couple of days. So here's the question. So should you get a dedicated summer car like a 911 and a winter beater, or an all-round Golf R? It's a really simple answer. You get a 911. Your life is better with a Porsche. That's the one example he has. But yeah, if you can get a Boxster or a 911, your life is much improved. Bakir, Happy New Year to you and your family. Right back at you. Happy New Year from Florida. Enjoy all that heat you're getting in Florida. Actually, it's cooler in Florida than it typically is this time of year. That polar vortex is killing much of North America. On the west coast here, where I am in Vancouver, the weather hasn't been that bad. Daytime highs above freezing, goes just slightly below freezing at night, but it's been pretty nice and sunny here. Dave's Random says, hey Zach, there's a rumor next gen Tundra will have an aluminum body and turbo option. What have you heard? I haven't heard anything yet. Detroit Auto Show is coming in what's the date? The 14th, I believe it is, or the 15th of January is when Media Day is for the Detroit Auto Show. So you might hear some big news. Well, obviously there's a lot of big announcements at Detroit, but typically the car manufacturers reserve the car that is kind of most important to the North American market for Detroit. So a truck announcement from Toyota would be a good place to do it, but we'll have to wait and see. But it is way overdue. The one thing about the Tundra, it's terrible on gas. It's not good on fuel, and the inside I don't like at all. I think it's really way behind the domestic manufacturers when it comes to interior design and comfort. Shane says, hey, I like the Pontiac G8 review you did way back. That was a great car. The Holden, made in Australia and was brought here as the Pontiac G8. It's too bad, you know, some of these cars aren't around anymore. Pontiac's gone. Buick lives on because it's so big in China. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. This one, Akash Raj, I hope I say it right. Hey, sir, Happy New Year. I wanted to ask you, can I get a used BMW 328 of 2013? Well, it really comes down to your budget. The one thing I will warn you about anytime you buy a premium used car is the buying it is the easy part. It's the maintaining it and keeping it running is the expensive part. And when you have a car like that that's going to be 5 years old, out of warranty more than likely, it might have an extended warranty for 1 more year if it was a CPO'd car, a certified pre-owned car. You have to budget in money for every year. And typically with BMWs and a lot of import cars, when they get to a certain age, it's not like the engine and the transmission, it's stupid things like the door locks or the power window switches, things like that. That's what nickel and dimes you to death. So just beware. Any car you're buying used, you have to get it inspected by a third-party mechanic. For example, if it's for sale at a dealer, you have to take it to another mechanic or have them send it over and get that pre-inspection done. Shane says, Happy New Year's. Right back at you. All right. Brian Careless says, watching from the cold Bronx. So you're living like a Canadian. I know it gets cold in the New York area, but yeah, I think it's a lot of people watching the ball drop at Times Square last night. It looked really cold. My wife and I were in New York. We were looking, actually, they looked at the coldest New Year's Eves in New York City, and we were there for the third coldest New Year's Eve, and we decided not to go to Times Square, and we watched it all from our hotel room, which is just opposite Central Park, right by Lincoln Center. And what we found was great was when New Year's came, we saw the ball drop on TV, but they shoot off fireworks from Central Park right outside our window. So it was like we had our own little private show there. And New York is awesome. This one comes and says, when is the Lexus LX coming out? Well, here's the thing. There's a whole bunch of trucks that need to be updated from the Toyota and Lexus line. For example, the Tundra, I talked about that. Then you have the Sequoia, the full-size body-on-frame SUV. That's so old now. It really needs to be done. And the new 4Runner has to come, and then, you know, things like the LX that are built off a lot of those common platforms. So yeah, Toyota is kind of really behind now when it comes to body-on-frame trucks. They brought out Tacoma. So 4Runner is definitely going to be coming, built on that. It's going to have, instead of the 4-liter 6-cylinder that's bad on gas, it'll go to the 3.5-liter. So stay tuned, as they say. James P., second live show I'm watching. Happy New Year, Zach and family. Same to you. Hopefully this year is going to be very healthy and prosperous for everybody. Charles Ing says, is a new STI better than my 2009 STI? Well, a lot of people were disappointed with the WRX and the STI not having the hatchback. And I think if you've got an older car that is the hatchback version, I would keep it because they don't make it anymore. And I don't know why. You know, you basically, you know, say to Subaru, listen, why can't we get that great Impreza-based hatchback STI or WRX in the lineup? And they just say it's not worth it. People buy, they've sold more of the sedans than they ever did of the hatchbacks. Yod says, do you think Camry will be a good first car? Well, Yeah, well, sure, why not? But I mean, I don't know how old you are. If you're a first-time buyer of a car and you're like in your late teens or early 20s, it's not exactly the coolest ride to be driving around in. I wouldn't pick that. You know, if you're looking for sort of Toyota reliability, the Corolla, the car that used to be sold as a Scion, and it's the Corolla hatchback, is a better car than the Corolla because it has independent rear suspension and it has a very different driving experience. And I like that car, the IM. I think it's a really good car. That is a little hipper than driving a Camry. Yale says, hello and Happy New Year. Long time, first time from Maui on vacation. Aren't you lucky? People bailed out on the Canadian weather or anywhere that's cold to get somewhere warm. I had a friend of mine, I texted back from Hawaii, got back this morning. It's an overnight flight and you arrive in the morning. Got home in Toronto and it's freezing cold there. Furnace is broken. That sucks. So he just told me that it's plus 4 degrees inside the house. So that's no fun. Maxime Bélanger says, I hope I said that right. What do you think of the absence of Apple CarPlay in Toyota vehicles? Do you think this will have an impact on sales for them? Thanks. Pleasure to watch your video. I think for a certain segment of the population, here's a little quiz for you. All right. What is the average age of a new car buyer in Canada? All right. What do you think the age is of a new car buyer in Canada? 30, 35, 40, 45. It's actually almost 50 years old is the average age of a new car buyer in Canada. So for that segment of the population, Android Auto and Apple CarPlay maybe not as big a factor. But when you're trying to get younger people into your brand, and all car companies are competing to get you to buy your first car with their brand, because the likelihood is if you buy a car with one brand and you're happy, you will stay with that through your life. For example, that Toyota question had a moment ago, if you buy a Toyota and you're a young person and you're happy with it, then you get a bigger Toyota, maybe get a RAV4, then you maybe get a Lexus, then you get a nicer Lexus as you get older. That's the dream of a car company. So I think that not having Android and Apple in the Toyota products is something that they are going to have to address eventually. I don't think it's hurting sales right now. There's going to be some younger people who are shopping that are going to move maybe towards Honda because they have it, or Volkswagen has it in all their cars. And that is definitely appealing to those people. But the average new car buyer is older, so it might take a little bit longer. How come Turo hasn't taken off in BC the way it has in other provinces and states? That is the, from what I understand, that is where you let out your car to somebody as like a rental. I've heard of it and I don't really know much about it, but yeah, I know people have used it and they certainly like it. We're so far behind in British Columbia, we don't even have Uber yet. It's a big political football here in BC. Actually, the provincial government lost the election and a new government came in, and a big part of that was because of Uber. There's a large South Asian population in one part of BC called Surrey, and 3 seats went to the opposition party based on Uber. And so yeah, I don't think it's going to be coming anytime soon because that party that's in power wants to keep those people happy. So, and the reason why is because a lot of the taxi drivers are South Asians. That's why. Where are the ID vehicles you drove? So there's the ID, that's the ID Buzz. The ID Cross is the crossover, and then there's the ID, the hatchback. And if you haven't watched the video that is on the channel, go and check it out. So these are the electric cars that are coming from Volkswagen. So these are concepts. If you were at an auto show and you saw this on the stand, actually got a chance to drive the real concept, one of one in the world. And these are hand-assembled, hand-built prototype cars, essentially. And the fact that they let me drive it is unbelievable. So that was done down in Long Beach, California. And watch the video because we show a little bit of the behind the scenes. So we were there the day they were actually doing the filming with the big arm on top of the Porsche Cayenne Turbo, the big movie arm. It's called a Russian arm. And so we got a chance to watch that. It was such a cool day to see the filming, how they do it, and getting a chance to drive this car that's going to be coming out in 2022. So Volkswagen is committed to doing it. Can you talk about the Q8? Well, I don't really know much about it other than it is coming, so we'll have to wait and see. I am going to South Africa to drive the new A7. That's coming up in February. There's like, I did so much traveling in November and December, and now it's all started up again. Detroit Auto Show. I've got 2 winter drive programs. I'm going to Camp 4 Canada, which is Porsche's winter driving school academy they have at Macanglis in Quebec, near Mont Tremblant. And then I'm going the week later to do another, excuse me, winter driving program with Volkswagen for all their 4Motion cars. Then it's off to South Africa for the A7, and it goes on and on and on. So it's going to be a very busy few months. So stay tuned for all of that. Somebody says, since we have a new Jeep Wrangler, does that mean that the Grand Cherokee is the oldest vehicle in the lineup? I think it is. And there is going to be a new Cherokee, not Grand Cherokee, but there's a new Cherokee, an updated facelifted Cherokee that's coming early this year. I already have to remember it's 2018 now. So yes, the Grand Cherokee is the oldest. It came out, oh, quite a long time ago now, and it is still a great, great product. It's a legacy heritage platform from Mercedes-Benz. You might remember that Mercedes and Chrysler were together, Daimler Chrysler, and they developed the Grand Cherokee off what was then the Mercedes ML platform, or the GLE as it's called now, which is one of the reasons why it is such a great driving product, is it has that Mercedes-Benz platform. So yeah, they'll probably do incremental facelifts to it. James P. says, the VW ID prototypes you drove, were they just the e-Golf underneath with the prototype body added, or was it a different drivetrain? I really like the Cros, feel like it looks kind of Tesla-ish. Now the one thing is, these are prototype hand-built concept cars. They're not really rolling cars, they're concepts, and they have this cobbled together electric system underneath it, which is absolutely nothing like what is going to come. So they have the MEB platform. That's the modular electronic platform that they're going to build all of these cars off, not only for Volkswagen, but for Audi as well. And the Audi electric SUV will be here by the end of the year for sale, which is going to be very exciting. Yeah, these were not built on that platform, and they weren't e-Golfs. I have no idea if there was a hamster under there or whatever. We didn't go very fast, maybe just a few miles an hour, but it was just so cool to get a chance to be in it and to drive around in it. And by the way, a lot of people mention with the crossover one, the ID Cros, it looks like a Tesla Model X. It doesn't in real life. It's much smaller. The Model X is quite big. I don't like the look of the Model X at all. I'm not a big fan of Tesla's design and their styling. I think it's very, well, a lot of their cars, the Model S is borrowed heavily from Jaguar and Aston Martin, and you might know the history behind that. But yeah, it's kind of like, it looks kind of dated to me, even though it's a very modern car. Somebody said, I noticed you're a much softer reviewer on driving television compared to your own channel. How much freedom do you have to criticize bad car experience? Well, yeah, I would agree with that, and that's, you know, one of the reasons why I have this outlet, is that I have freedom to do what I like. So you notice that, and the problem with driving television versus what I do on Motormouth Canada, this channel, is that show is scripted. So I write a script for myself and for Lacey. So whenever you see Lacey on driving television, what she's saying I wrote, unless she's on the road, like doing a launch somewhere, she does her own work. But for the most part, I write everything for the show. And when you write something and you perform it, is very different than what I do on Motormouth Canada, where I just talk. And I don't write anything down when I do my reviews. I have some bullet points that I want, you know, the horsepower and the torque and things that I have on a piece of paper, but I make it all up as I'm driving mostly. So that's one of the big differences. Hey, watching from Bangkok, Thailand. Want to visit there one day? I'd love to visit. That sounds good. Gordon Freeman says, is it right that people with expensive cars look down on people with cheap cars? Well, maybe for some. I don't. Like, I'll often be out walking my dog and I see somebody with a cool car, if it's an older car, and I say, hey, that's a cool, like, what did I see lately? There was somebody driving a Toyota Cressida station wagon. Like, how cool is that? From the 1980s, the real square Toyota Cressida. And I was like, hey, that's a cool car. And somebody recently had the very first RAV4, the two-door, the little one, when it first came out, and I was talking, it looked like it was minty, brand new. So no, I don't look down at people who have less expensive cars. Hey, listen, I got a 10-year-old Toyota Tacoma base model, manual transmission, 4-cylinder. So that's one of the cars I have. Brian says, will you be coming to the New York Auto Show? It's funny that you mentioned this, because another colleague of mine in Toronto, we were messaging back and forth on Facebook today, and he was talking about the New York Auto Show, and I said, what are the media days? And he said the 28th and the 29th of March, which I don't think I'm going to be able to go, because the 28th of March is my son's birthday. So I will be here for his birthday and probably not in New York, unless, yeah, I probably won't make it. So unfortunately, and that's 2 years in a row that I haven't been to the New York show, which is, so I've been to Shanghai, Beijing, Geneva, Frankfurt, Paris, all these auto shows all over the world. And my two favorite auto shows are Paris Auto Show and New York Auto Show. Paris Auto Show because you're in Paris, and New York Auto Show because you're in New York. And then Detroit is actually my third favorite, because Detroit is still a very important show. Hey, Happy New Year's from Smithers, BC. Love the reviews and live streams. Keep them coming. Thank you very much. Have you ever done a show on the damaging effects of winter on our cars? No, you just have to look at them. You don't need to do a show. It's horrible. The salt, like, I mean, we live on the West Coast where we put very little salt down, if any, and the cars are just really like minty out here. But then you go back east and you see the corrosion, and you can see the weakness. Like, for example, Mazda had a real problem with rust on their cars. You'd go to Quebec and they would just be, but what's interesting is in the province of Quebec is the biggest market share for Mazda cars in Canada, and one of the biggest market shares in the world is in the province of Quebec, and they have a lot of rust problems with Mazdas, but people still keep buying them. Julie Morton says, Nissan Leaf, buy or lease? This is a very good question. So there's the Leaf, and I was pleasantly surprised by this car, and it isn't going to make my top 10 list of cars I drove, and I'm going to put that video out probably tomorrow, top 10 vehicles I drove in 2017. And the thing is, maybe more in the US than in Canada, but the way electric cars are marketed and sold in the US is by leasing. They have such competitive lease rates to the point where you could get a Nissan Leaf, I remember in the US, for like less than $200 a month. It was crazy how cheaply they were leasing them, and it's a real lease game in the US, but it kills the residual value of these cars. And in Canada, speaking to the executives at Nissan Canada, they're saying they're trying to get people to buy them. But it's just like your phone. You know, every 2 years you can, you know, get a new phone, or every 2 or 3 years, and people want the newest and the latest. And unfortunately, that's the cycle we're going to get in with electric cars. People are going to want to upgrade for better range, better performance. And yeah, if it was me, I would lease an electric car. Rami says, Happy New Year. I currently have a Mercedes C300 lease finishing in August and looking at leasing the same car then, but I'm wondering if I'll be hitting a model which is mid-cycle refresh. I'm trying to remember when the C-Class came out. I think it was 3 years ago now. So yeah, I think it's going to be, you can never figure these things out, right? So one thing you might want to do is you might want to extend the lease. You can do that. If I have any news on the C-Class, I will let you know. Same thing, Detroit Auto Show is coming up in just a couple of weeks. C-Class is such an important car. If there's a refresh for that car, I will let you know. Thoughts on leasing a Lexus IS 300 all-wheel drive F-Sport for a young professional? Absolutely nothing wrong with the Lexus IS. The only issue I have is that is another car in the Toyota Lexus portfolio that is really, really long in the tooth now. That car needs to be redone. So yeah, absolutely, go for it. It's a beautifully built car. I find it too small for me in the back seat. Now that I sit in the back seat, but it's a bit cramped. But yeah, go ahead. There's nothing wrong with that car at all. Happy New Year from Andre. Any word on the first Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV when it'll arrive in Canada? Actually, that's another event that's happening. I will be at the end of this month, January. I think it's the week of the 21st or 22nd. Driving the PHEV. The launch is here in Vancouver, so they are going to be arriving very, very shortly. So yeah, just 3 weeks away from that ride and drive. So yeah, it's going to be in dealers very, very soon. Pricing has already been announced for that car. I just bought a Toyota RAV4, no Apple CarPlay, was not concerned for me. I want reliability. So there you go. Somebody was asking about, do you think if Toyota's lack of Android and Apple in their head units is going to stop people from buying? So there's a perfect example. They bought it because of reliability, not because of the head unit. We just got a message here. Minus 32 with the wind chill in Quebec City. That's way too cold. I was up in the Yukon where we did the winter tire thing. We had the two Subaru cross tracks and we did the winter tire. If you haven't watched that video, I encourage you to watch it. And it was minus 22 there with no wind chill, and it was damn cold. So minus 32, that's terrible. This is from Fernando Santos. Happy New Year from Montreal. Question regarding the Volkswagen diesel debacle and the new e-Golf. Do you think diesel is coming to an end or shifting like Europe? Well, diesel is not going to be offered by the Volkswagen Group, I don't think. They might, this is a very big might, bring back the 3-liter diesel for utility vehicles, for example, like the Q7, or you know, I think the one vehicle that could really use that engine is the new Atlas from VW and cars like the Cayenne. But I don't think so. It's a very big if. So diesel, they don't want to get into a whole lot of trouble with that. So they're going to push people towards plug-in hybrids and then full electric cars. Volkswagen Group has invested billions of euros, and the one big differentiator between a company like Volkswagen Group and Tesla is Volkswagen Group and General Motors as well, with the Bolt and the Volt, is they have much deeper pockets. They sell over 10 million cars worldwide. So yes, very small percentage of them are electric cars, but they can share those costs in the research and development across 10 million cars a year. Now the largest car company now, or I guess we could call it a group, is now Nissan, Renault, and Mitsubishi has been added in there. And Nissan, the Leaf is the best-selling electric car in the world, okay? A lot of people think, you know, Tesla gets all the fanfare, but really almost 300,000 of those cars are being sold. So they have a first-to-market advantage, and now you roll in Mitsubishi with the Outlander plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. It's a compelling story. So the industry is shifting to adding more electrification. Here's my worry, and I've brought this up many times before. You know the movie Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. One of the problems, I think, is that a lot of car companies are going to build electric cars and people won't buy them. There are going to be winners and losers in the electric car game. Nissan is obviously a first-to-market advantage winner. Tesla, known for their performance, winner. Chevrolet and General Motors in a good position to bring more models based on that Bolt platform. That'll be a winner, but there's going to be lots of other cars that unfortunately are just going to sit on dealers' lots. Jared asks a follow-up, how long before we get cheap long-range electric cars? Well, this car is, the Leaf is $36,000 in Canada, cheaper in the US. If you live in the province of Ontario where they give you $14,000 off the price, that is a cheap electric car, and it has 240 kilometers of range. Now, for most people, they don't need 240 kilometers of range every day. And as a friend of mine who has a Tesla says, the nice thing about an electric car is you wake up every morning and it's fully charged. It's like a full tank of fuel, every single morning. So the reality is most people do not use all of the battery every single day, and you often will have two cars in a family. And if you had a car like that and you drove 99% of your time commuting and didn't need an gas car, and you had that 1 or 2 weekends a year, you can rent a car and it would still be cheaper to factor in the price of having that rental every once in a while. Can you explain the balloon financing with Mercedes and how it differs from regular financing, and is it advisable? So there's basically 3 forms of buying a car, 4 forms. You write a check, you pay cash, and you buy the car. You lease the car, which means you make payments on it, and you're basically paying for the depreciation over 3 or 4 years, and you have the option of buying the car at the end of the lease. So that's number 2. Number 3 is amortize the financing over many, many years. So you maybe 5 or 6 or even 7 years, you make a monthly payment, but at the end of that 6 or 7 years, you bought the car outright, you owe no more money. And then the last one are these balloon financing, which are very similar to a lease. So you make lower monthly payments with the balloon payment 3 or 4 years down the road. So you make lower monthly payments, and all they're doing is mirroring basically the lease values, but you are obligated, instead of giving the car back like you would on a lease, to make that final payment. Okay, and the problem with those is if you're on when you lease a car, say it's Mercedes-Benz or Daimler Finance or whatever it's called, they actually own the car. With these balloon payment systems, you are on the title for the car. It's very different. So when you take over a lease, they sign it over, say Honda Finance signs it over to Bob Smith. Now Bob Smith owns the car. With these balloon ones, you own the car all the way through, and you're on the hook for that money. So is it advisable? You really have to run the numbers and figure out whether it's something you want to do. I would, honestly, if you're getting a Mercedes, I would lease one. Keeps your price down, and you have the option. I call it the long-term test drive. You lease a car for 3 years. If you like the car, it's been good to you, it had no major repairs, then you can just finance the remainder over maybe another 3 or 4 years. Do you think Toyota should bring back the Venza due to high demand of SUVs? It was literally my favorite Toyota. Now this is interesting. I think I've told this story before. I was at the Camry launch in Prince Edward Island this past summer, and I had a beer with the chief engineer sitting at the bar at the end of the night talking about all kinds of things. Some things were off the record, and I'm not going to repeat them here, but a really cool guy. And I said to him, you know, there's an opportunity to bring back a Venza-like vehicle based on the new Camry platform, which is so good. It's so much improved. And then you do what Subaru's been doing for decades and what other manufacturers have copied. I call it outbacking. Raise it up a little bit, put some cladding on, bigger wheels, looks more like a crossover, like Volkswagen has done with the All-Track and Subaru has done so successfully. I think there would be a market for that product. He smiled and nodded, but didn't say whether that was going to happen. What about the Supra? Well, we've been waiting for this car, and every time you talk to the people at Toyota, they go, Supra? What's Supra? But we all know it's coming. They just won't say anything about it. So another, sit and wait. Maybe Detroit Auto Show. We'll have to wait and see. This is from Yale. Says, renting a Chevy Impala. Impressed. Loads of room for the 5 of us and all our gear. Who needs a minivan? Your thoughts on this family car, please, Zach. I think that General Motors, and I've been saying this for years and years, General Motors with their new products are so good now that they should really compete for anybody's consideration when you're shopping for a car. Unfortunately, a mid to large size car like the Impala is Deadsville in the marketplace. The winners in this sort of mid-sized car race are Camry, an Accord, and then everybody else, right? So you have Camry and Accord are here. Actually, it's the other way around. It's Accord and Camry. Accord sells more than Camry. And then all the numbers just fall right off. People are moving towards crossover vehicles. Mid-sized car sales are tanking, and the only ones that are maintaining market share and hopefully going to grow with these new products are Camry and Accord. So here's the thing. Impala, wonderful product. Malibu as well. My wife's uncle was over from Victoria, and we saw him on the holidays, and he's got an Impala, and he says it's great. It runs really well and does everything he wants. So here's an opportunity to buy these cars, especially used. A lot of times they're used in rental fleets, and you can get a great deal when they come out of those fleets and for sale. And here's the one thing. One of the best used cars you can buy is a Buick, okay? Buick is right at the very top when it comes to consumer approval. J.D. Power and Associates Consumer Reports, it scores very high in terms of quality. It scores very high in terms of interior quietness and refinement, but they don't hold their value in the used market. So if you really don't care about what car you drive, a Buick is a hell of a car to buy used. First of all, it depreciates quickly, it's very comfortable, very reliable, very well put together, and you can pick one up and drive one of those for a song. How do you think the upcoming Subaru Ascent will compare to the competition? Well, I saw the Ascent at the LA Auto Show. That's the new 3-row SUV from Subaru. It looks like a pregnant Forester. I think it's going to do fine. I mean, speaking to the product planners about what went into the planning of this car, I think that, you know, one of the great things about coming late to a party is that you get to learn from everybody else. Volkswagen did this with the Atlas. I mean, Volkswagen is, I see them everywhere, those new Atlas. The sales are through the roof because they were last sort of into the game. Subaru did have the Tribeca before. They got rid of it, thank God, and now they brought back this new car. I think that being late to the party, you basically get to borrow everybody else's, you know, secrets and put them into your product and hopefully come up with something that's pretty good. So that vehicle is coming, I believe it's this summer. We'll get a chance to drive it. For a family, which is better, a Durango or a Grand Cherokee in terms of winter driving, driving dynamics, luxury, and practicality? Funny you mentioned this. My wife and I were talking about this the other day. She said, if I was going to buy a domestic car, and I like the ruggedness of domestic trucks, she said she would get a Durango. We had a Durango several times with the family going on summer trips through British Columbia, and everybody loved the Durango. Everybody. I loved driving it. My wife loved the look of it, the interior, and the kids loved the space. The Grand Cherokee and the Durango are based on that same ML platform, the Mercedes platform I mentioned. One is longer than the other. One nice thing about the Durango is it does actually handle better than the majority of 3-row utilities. For example, you get into a Hyundai Santa Fe XL, or you get into a Pilot, or you get into a Highlander, and then you get into a Durango, you notice the handling characteristics are improved. The Cherokee will handle better because it's a little bit smaller, but the Durango is a great product, but expensive. You look for these things. You look at a Durango, they are expensive. I see them around, but man, they're not cheap. Oh, here's a good question. This is from Jasser. Which used car do you think you'll see rising in value? I have my eye on a Mercedes SL 450, late 80s, as well as a BMW M Coupe E86. Well, it's funny that you mentioned the SL because I have been online looking at used Mercedes SLs because I've always loved that body shape of car. I'm not sure the 450 would be the one that I would choose. The 560, the very last one, was the more sophisticated of the bunch. If I had my way, I would get a mid-60s SL. Just absolutely gorgeous. But yeah, they don't really have much value in the used market right now. You can shop for these old Mercedes SL and you can pick them up fairly inexpensively. Really check for rust if you're going to look at one. A BMW M Coupe, I think, is another really, really cool car. I'm trying to remember which one the E86 is. I do like the one that I think they called it the running shoe, the original M Coupe. My cousin had one of those. That's such a cool car. Do you recommend buying or leasing an e-Golf? Back to my point on electric cars. For me, I'd lease an electric car. Hey, Zach, do you watch Top Gear or the Grand Tour? Any thoughts? This is from Keith. Yeah, I don't religiously watch them, to be honest with you, but I have over the years watched Top Gear. I used to watch Top Gear. My mom lives in Scotland. My family lives in Scotland. So I used to watch Top Gear when it wasn't broadcast in North America. I'd go and visit my family there, and I just loved it. They did so many cool things. It's It's not a, it's an entertainment show that happens to have cars in it. It's not, you don't really get much information about the cars. So it's loads of fun, and I think those guys are great. Happy New Year. You previously mentioned you're giving up your A7. First, out of any car you have owned, why the A7? First, out of any car you could have owned, why the A7? Next, did you, can we find out what we're switching to? Well, I don't want to blow my luck on what I'm trying to get here. But there is a car in my future, and hopefully it's going to be in the next couple of months. So of all the cars, why did we choose the A7? So if you really want the answer to that, go and watch the video I did on it. So type in A7. You'll have to dig down a little bit. It's from a few years ago, but I did a review on our own car. So go and watch the video. What we love about the A7, first of all, it's the TDI. So it's got monster torque and just pulls like a freight train away from a light and just flies on the highway. Last speeding ticket in the A7, driving on the Coquihalla, and that was a few years ago. So I have had one speeding ticket in like 10 years, and there it was in the A7. It just, every single time I drive it, I always get out of that car and I go, what a beautiful car. It's just a wonderful car to drive. It's a beautiful car to look at, and it's a practical car because it's got that huge tailgate in the back. So we went from a Cayenne to the A7, and it was kind of a great make everybody happy. My wife we'd had utility vehicles for 10 years, and she wanted a break. We'd had an X5 and a Cayenne, and she said, I want to go back to a car for a little while, and that really fit the ticket for everybody. Our kids, you know, could fit in it easily, but the big trunk at the back, and I just love the diesel. So I don't want to jinx it yet, but when I get the new ride, I will let you know. The wheels are turning. Don't worry, it's coming, it's coming. Somebody asked, what's Motormouth Canada's car of the year? I didn't really have a car of the year. I was thinking about this because I did my list of the top 10 cars I drove, and that video will be coming out in the next day or so. But there wasn't one overarching car of the year. There was a bunch of really good cars, but nothing that really blew it out of the water. I feel special driving a car that is listed as an exotic car, which is a 2011 Saab 9.5 Aero. They only built 11,000 of them. Yeah, well, anytime you have scarcity, you can often find great, not great value, but great resale value. If there's a very few cars made or sold, they often hold their value very well. Unfortunately, because Saab is a dead brand and orphaned, that might not be the case. But yes, it is a cool car. This one comes from VJ Ram. Hey Zach, do you think Canada will get the updated Q3 that is 220 horsepower engine, or will we see a new Q3? Europe has a Q3 with the same engine as the A3, but we get the old one. It's one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of the Q3 as it currently sits, and I agree with you, it would be nice to get a bump in power. That's basically the old Tiguan, the previous gen Tiguan platform and engine with 200 horsepower. And you're better off, you would have been better off to get the Tiguan for much less money. Or just stretch to get a Q5. The new Q5 is fantastic. Really one of the best vehicles out there on the road. If you're looking for a premium utility, it definitely is going to be worthwhile. But yeah, I have no news on that. If you could have any car today, what would it be? No budget limitations. I would have a 911 GT3. Simple. That's my favorite. I'm a 911 guy. I'm a Porsche guy. I love Porsches. I would love the new Panamera. I think that, and then I'd have a Cayenne as well. So all my bases would be covered. And I say to, you know, I joked when we got our Cayenne years ago with my wife, and I had an old air-cooled 911 at the time, and I said to her, life is better with a Porsche. And having had one in the family for many years now, she agrees. Okay, this one comes from Ahmed, says, Happy New Year to you and your kind family. My question is, a Chinese state-owned Chery and its luxury division Is it true they're coming to North America? I have been going to auto shows like Detroit, for example, and hearing about the Chinese cars coming. And it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. They definitely are going to try and come into the North American market. The biggest problem you have with anybody, you look at Alfa Romeo, I mean, win all kinds of awards for the best car, you know, on the road for handling. Have you driven past an Alfa Romeo dealer? It's the dealer network is the hardest thing, and getting guys who own dealerships to put out millions of dollars to build a new dealer for a Chinese brand that nobody knows about is a big risk for somebody to invest your money. So I don't know what to say. I think that, yeah, they could come in if somebody else brought them in as a sort of a side brand. Like, for example, if Volvo and Geely, if Geely came in because Volvo's owned by Geely, that might work. But Volvo is a very small player. They have very little penetration in North America. Happy New Year from Toronto. Can you do a review on the Land Rover Discovery TD6? The diesel, is the diesel the right engine for Canadian climate? I love the TD6 and the Range Rover products. Unfortunately, the only one in the that gets it in is the Discovery. Unfortunately, it's not available in the Jaguar F-Pace, and it's not available in the Velar. They get the 4-cylinder diesel, which I think is a huge mistake. That has 443 pound-feet of torque. It's a wonderful engine. We did a review, my wife and I, of the Range Rover Sport with that engine. Absolutely brilliant. Friends of ours moved to California. They just got a Range Rover Sport with that diesel engine. Absolutely love it. Now, about the Canadian climate, I'm on the Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche Facebook page around the diesel buyback situation in Canada, and a lot of people are on there with the frigid temperatures we've had the last week or so across much of Canada, not being able to start their cars. And one of the reasons is people need to remember when it gets very cold, you need to put an additive into your diesel because it comes like a gel and the car won't start. The injectors can freeze, and the fuel line, if there's any moisture in there, can freeze. And this can also happen with a gasoline car, but that's one thing to keep in mind. And so it depends in Toronto, where those few very, very cold days a year, it's a good idea to run some definitely additives into your diesel. What made you move from Toronto, where you grew up, to Vancouver? Well, I started my career in radio. I was a radio disc jockey for many years. A lot of people may be surprised to know that. I used to play the hits backwards from 10 to number 1, the top 10 at 10. Here we go, number 10. I did all that stuff for many years. And I went to school in London, Ontario. I grew up in Toronto, went to school in London, Ontario, finished school there, and then got a job in London at one of the top radio stations. I worked there for 5 years, so I was in London for a total of 7 years. And then there was a brand new radio station that opened up in Vancouver called Z95, so people on the West Coast know that. I was hired to come and help put that station on the air way back in 1991. So I packed up my Toyota Celica GT and I drove across the country by myself in 3 days. Now, mind you, I didn't go across Canada. I ducked down into the States and went under Lake Superior to Seattle and then up to Vancouver. So I drove 13 hours the first day, 12 hours the second day, and 21 hours the third day. And I needed to get to Vancouver because they were putting the brand new radio station on the air like 2 days later. So I remember the guy who hired me says, I need you here by May 23rd because we're going to put the station on the air. And I think I got here on the 21st of May. But yeah, that's a long time ago now. So I moved to Vancouver, worked in radio, then switched to television. And all that time, I started reviewing cars back in 1992. 1992, I started reviewing cars, believe it or not, on the radio. It's hard to kind of review a car on the radio, but that's when I started. So I've been doing car reviews now longer than I have doing radio. I did morning TV for many years, and this is what I've been doing the longest. What's your opinion on Mitsubishi's lineup in North America? I personally feel the lineup is lagging behind the competition. Well, they have the new Eclipse Cross that came out. This is a very edgy looking vehicle, and I think And when you see it in pictures, and you can go and watch the video, yes, some people might say it looks a little bit like the Aztec, the Pontiac from years ago, which was one of the worst looking cars on the road. But when you see it in person, it actually looks much better. The interior of that new Mitsubishi is so much better. And then they have the Outlander plug-in hybrid that's coming in the next month or so. So yeah, they have some new products, but you're right, the RVR is dated, and the Outlander is being given some mild facelifts over the years. The Lancer is gone now. They're getting rid of the Lancer, and so they're moving just towards an SUV company. But here's the thing. Now it's a Nissan, Renault, Mitsubishi alliance. So up until 2020, the cars that come out into the marketplace will be the last of the real Mitsubishi cars. After 2020, they're going to be toolkit cars, meaning that the engineers and the designers can go to the toolkit that is provided by Nissan Renault and say, okay, we want this engine, we want this transmission, we want these features, and then they build their own car. Independently, however, they're going to have their own design and engineering teams making Mitsubishis into Mitsubishis, but what goes into them is going to be borrowed from the other brands. So you're going to see more. They have real plans to grow the brand over the next few years. So this Eclipse Cross is just the first step towards what else is coming. Thoughts on the RWB Porsches? I think they are horrendous. I am no fan. I understand it's a big tuner look. For those that are not aware, the RWB Porsches are this guy who slams these cars down. He puts the big fender flares on. They look like race cars, but the reality is most of them are just regular Carreras that look like race cars. I don't know. I just think it's a great way to ruin what is a wonderful car. I don't like them at all. If you have one, I hope I didn't offend you. I've seen them in person. I just think they're hideous myself. Andrew Peterson says, Happy New Year. Recently just bought first car in the late 20s. Good for you. I did research which cars did and didn't have CarPlay and Android Auto. Never even visited the brands that didn't have CarPlay. So that's Andrew replying to my conversation earlier about is Apple and Android important in head units? Well, for someone in his late 20s, proof is right there. Older people, maybe not, but most new car buyers, the average age is shockingly 50 years old. I've heard that the only Mitsubishi dealership in my state is going out of business. Not surprised. I don't see anybody buying Mitsus. In Canada, they do fairly well, and a big part of it is the 10-year warranty that they provide. So not only did they do the 10-year powertrain warranty, for a few months this year, they did a 10-year bumper-to-bumper warranty. Now that jacks sales up. But they do better, I think, in Canada because we're much more value-oriented in our buying habits in Canada, and that brand offers value based on the warranty. What do you think of the new Passat? When will you do a review? It's a car that I haven't done in a while, and it was interesting. I was down driving the ID Buzz there, and the car that we were being driven around in is the Passat. The one thing about the Passat, it's huge. It's just massive in the back seat, has a huge trunk. So if you like the idea of having a car instead of a utility or a van and you want something big, it's definitely a roomy car. Why is it there are no more European cars in North America available? There were so many other cars like Renault, Peugeot, Seat, and Skoda, why is there no market for other car makers? It comes back to my original point. You got to remember that Renault and Peugeot were sold in North America, and they left because they were horrible cars that rusted. And my aunt had a Peugeot 504 when we were kids, and it had the name Pierre Peugeot. And her mother was French, from France, and that's why they had a Renault. But these were not good cars. Fiat is another brand that left and came back, and Fiat sales are absolutely terrible in Canada. They are selling some months literally just a couple of hundred cars. So I'm not sure how long they're going to be able to keep that up. So that's one of the reasons. There's just so much competition in North America for the car dollar. Bringing a brand new brand in, this is the big question. Will Alfa be able to survive? I don't know. I've seen one Alfa Romeo in Vancouver, and this city is full of prestige cars, and I've only ever seen one on the road. Somebody said, heard rumors that French cars might be re-entering the North American market. Thoughts? Back to my point. It's the dealer network. So I'll take a wait and see on that. Okay, Sandy says, hey Zach, I love your reviews. Porsche Macan S or Range Rover Evoque and Porsche Cayenne S or Range Rover Sport. This is really simple. Porsche is right at the very top every year in terms of quality and satisfaction. They're so well made. They're going to work. You're going to drive them and you're going to be very happy until you have to maintain it every year. The service costs can be expensive, but if it comes down to a Range Rover Evoque, there's no comparison. Macan S all day long, and if a Range Rover Sport versus a Cayenne S all day long. Everyone's talking about e-cars. You can run cars with propane, cheap and environmentally friendly. There was a big push in the 90s for propane. And in fact, Ford had factory direct propane cars. I remember I had a Crown Victoria. It was navy blue and it had a propane, factory propane. And so picked it up and they had it filled for me. I couldn't go anywhere in the city faster than the speed limit because everybody thought I was a cop. You drive a plain blue Crown Victoria, everybody slows down. It was the most boring week of my life. But they used to sell Econoline vans with the propane already in them. It is a good fuel, you're right. And also natural gas, for example, the Civic was, I think it's still sold or has been sold up until recently as a natural gas car in the United States. And it is the fuel economy champion. What I would like to see, everybody's pushing electric. I would like to see, if you're going to give $14,000 to an individual, one person, to drive a car, I think it's absolutely asinine that we give somebody $14,000 rebate for personal transportation. The money should be going into mass transit. That's where the money should be going. And if you're going to give somebody a $14,000 rebate, why can't you give somebody, like we had in British Columbia for a few years, you had a rebate based on the fuel economy and the size of the car. So we overbuy the cars that we drive. We don't all need to be driving huge cars. We could be driving smaller cars, more efficient cars. So they used to have rebates on small, efficient cars like the Yaris and the Fit and the Fiesta. And they sold a lot of them then. And they were much friendlier on the environment. For most people, that's all they needed to get to work and back. So if you're going to give rebates for electric cars, I'd like to see rebates for people buying smaller cars as well. But really, I don't think there should be any rebates. The money should go into transit. Transit. That's how you're going to get people out of their cars. You go to Tokyo, you go to London or New York City, people take transit because their lines are everywhere. That's the way to get people to get out of their cars. And will you be doing a review of the Honda Clarity plug-in hybrid electric vehicle? I will eventually. I was invited to go to the launch of that. Unfortunately, there was a conflict. There were 7 events that one week, and I couldn't get to it, but I will get that car. What do you think of the 2018 Leaf SV as a commuter car? Any serious negatives with this car? Not crazy about the hard plastic interiors. Yeah, well, you know what? The Bolt is worse on the inside. That's one of the reasons why I like the Ioniq and the e-Golf, is the interiors don't look cheap and cheerful. They look high-end. And when you see the Golf R video that it's going to come out the next day or so, I talk about the e-Golf and how Volkswagen treats their e-Golf as their premium Golf offering. So the way it goes with Volkswagen, it's Golf R, and e-Golf is the second most prestigious car in their lineup. And when you get in it and you sit in it, it looks like it. And I call their cars Audi Light, and you really feel that. And then you get into like the Bolt, what a wonderful car. And by the way, it did make my list of the top 10 cars I drove of 2017. But yeah, you have to buy into the philosophy that you're buying something that was done to be inexpensive as possible, and as light as possible. And that's one of the reasons why they put in the least expensive interiors. What do you think of the new Volkswagen Jetta? Well, you were reviewing it early. It's going to be shown at the Detroit Auto Show. So keep an eye out. I will have a little quick video on that, and it's going to be shown then. It's just a couple of weeks away until it's unveiled in Detroit. When do you expect the Toyota 4Runner to be redesigned? I think any time this year is probably when it's going to be coming. Too bad we don't get better selection of station wagons in Canada. Audi A4 all-road or V60 cross-country. New V60 should be out next year, but not sure I should wait. Expensive. That's one of the problems. You look at these cars and then you look at the SUV, and the SUV's the same price and it gives way more utility for most people. It's one of the reasons they don't sell. All right, I'm coming up on an hour here, so I've been blabbering along. And by the way, how am I doing this? Yeah, all this stuff along here, follow Facebook, all that stuff. Go to the website if you want, and follow along on Instagram. Thanks to everybody. First live show of 2018 on the first day of 2018. So hope everybody has an awesome year, healthy, prosperous, be good to your family and your friends, and I'll see you next time, and Happy New Year.